Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. I am Felris, sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends today, here to bring you another boss guide. Boss guides are super helpful, especially for early game players, and so I am going to give you the best guide to the Chimera Clan Boss. Now, the Chimera Boss is important for many reasons. It gives you the eyeballs, these ocular masses, which you can use to craft relics. Unfortunately, I don't have enough to craft any relics at the moment, as well as fragments. It gives you fragments for the mythical champion Embreeze the Anomaly. Now, Embreeze is an absolutely fantastic champion. He has an irresistible stone skin removal that does not proc the 50-50 chance, so you definitely want to be going for him if you struggle in arena. In addition, his second form here can also solo Sand Devil, right? So if this champion is about to get hit by a fatal hit, preempts that hit and instantly places a revive on death buff on them for one turn before the damage is taken. So a revive on death passive, which is incredibly awesome. He looks cool as well. Knight's Revenant champion, and you can get him completely for free, a free mythical, by doing the Chimera, as well as the gemstones that you socket into the relics in order to get those added bonuses. Hey, you, stop right there. Click the link in the description below to get a free Corrado, as well as Fane, Ugo, and Vergus as you level up your account in Raid. Here's exactly how to do it. Log out of Flareon Play on PC and uninstall. Click the link in the description below and register with a brand new email. Log in and complete the tutorial. You'll find Corrado in your inbox, as well as Fane, Ugo, and Vergus as you level up. If you're looking for a great start in Raid, this is your chance. Make sure you get your free Corrado as well as 3 free epics by clicking my link right away. So I got a really interesting one that I stuck on my Mithrala Lifebane here. The wearer's resistance increases by 30 against buff removal and buff steal effects. I use a similar gemstone on my Elva here, so I have the I think it's like Unbreakable. The wearer gains an additional 30 resistance against enemies attempting to play stun, freeze, sleep, provoke, fear, true fear, petrification, or sheep debuffs. I have my Elva built with a little bit of resistance as it is, so she can do some resist work, which is kind of cool. So absolutely get those extra stats from the relics and the extra bonuses from the gemstones. But how do you beat this boss? Well, we're going to go over it, and we are going to build a little bit of a team here today. First of all, you have these trials. So in addition to one keying and getting these chests, right, you also have the trials that you have to finish, all right? So each form has a different set of trials. If you don't know, there are 4 forms to the Chimera. There's the ultimate form, there's the ram form, the lion form, and the viper form. And each form has different trials. Now, each form has a different set of trials. So there are 3 trials per form, and you want to get as many of these done as possible. Now, my advice is to make sure you can one key the boss first and then focus on doing as many trials as possible. For that reason, my trials usually aren't all the best, but we're going to try to get some more done today. So on the ram form here, the first set of trials, damage the Chimera while it is under a fear or true fear debuff, only counts damage from skills, so you can't use poisons or anything like that, and you'll be rewarded with 5 of the ocular masses. These rewards do get better the higher difficulty that you tackle on Chimera. I believe on Ultra Nightmare you can get the mythical ocular masses. Then you can get the second trial here, damage the Chimera on all 5 of its turns in this form using skills that scale based on enemy max HP, as well as poison, HP burn, and smite debuffs. And then deplete the Chimera's duel bar within 5 turns. We'll talk about the duel bar when we get into the Chimera's kit, right? The second set of trials for this form, place 5 unique debuffs on the Chimera within 5 of its turns while your champions are under increased accuracy buffs. Then damage the Chimera while it is under a weakened debuff and your champions are under increased crit rate or increased crit damage buffs, only counts damage from skills. Then the hard one here, damage the Chimera with a single skill while it is under weaken and decreased defense debuffs, will not count damage from counterattacks and skills that scale based on enemy max HP. So you need increased accuracy to do these trials. You need weaken and increased crit rate, increased crit damage, and decreased defense, right? Now, the truth is, the vast majority of teams will not be able to do every single trial. There are spreadsheets out there that will tell you what you can do, and really the vast majority of the time, you want to focus on the ones that are going to give you the highest rarity crafting materials. So that would be these. And then, as well as this third set of trials for the Ram form, damage the Chimera within 3 of its turns while it is under decreased defense debuff and your champions are under perfect veil buffs. So then you need a perfect veil buff. We're going to be bringing one of those today. Then place 5 unique debuffs on the Chimera and 5 unique buffs on your champions within 3 of the Chimera's turns. Then block 6 stun debuffs using block debuffs, intercept, or stone skin buffs within 5 of the Chimera's turns. So, you probably want to be focusing on this second set of trials here and this third set, since you're going to be getting a legendary gemstone as well. Scrolling down, for the Viper form, you're going to be wanting to focus this second set of trials here. Damage the Chimera with poison debuffs while it is also under a poison sensitivity debuff. Keep all your champions alive for 3 Chimera turns. Successfully revive 1 ally or all allies when reviving multiple champions. Those are going to be the priority trials, but you can't plan to get trials done if you don't know what exactly this boss does. So for that, we're going to go into the boss guide here and figure out what the heck this boss does. Holy cow, that is a lot of text. So just going to take it one step at a time. Now, the Chimera always goes and starts in its ultimate form, then it switches to the Ram form, then it switches back to the ultimate form, then the Lion form, then the ultimate form, then the Viper form, and then finally back to the ultimate form. So you have to plan for all of those in a proper order. So the ultimate form is where the majority of the fight takes place. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for the affinity of the ultimate form. I keep saying alternate form. It's ultimate form. And make sure that your damage dealers are appropriately lined up for the correct affinity, because each Chimera rotation, the affinities change, right? We just had a new Chimera rotation, and so now the ultimate form is magic affinity. Now, let's take a look at what the ultimate form does. A1, Baleful Torment. Attacks all enemies, places a provoke debuff for 1 turn. If a target has less than 50% HP, places a provoke debuff for 2 turns instead. Also places a 30% decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Now, crowd control A1s are kind of the signature of Chimera. So for that reason, you're going to want to bring a lot of cleansing and a lot of block debuffs. So there are many different champions that you can use for this role. The best are Sifi and Elva. Sifi is a undead void legendary, and Elva is a legendary Sylvan Watcher. Now, there are epic champions that you can use, such as Molosseum Mage, but I think using the Marooned is also a fantastic option. A Sing from the Sacred Order is a great option as well, because you do not want your teams to constantly get provoked. And AoE block debuffs is going to be your best friend in Chimera. We're going to see that later on as well. Now, the A2 attacks all enemies. The damage inflicted by this skill increases by 10% for each debuff on the Chimera. Also places a 30% increased speed buff on the Chimera for 2 turns. You just gotta watch out for nukage. And then, of course, if you can bring a block buffs or a buff strip champion, that would be good as well. You do not want the Chimera to take more turns faster, because you only have 65 Chimera turns to do as much damage as possible to the boss. Then the A3, Consume Matter, attacks all enemies before attacking, removes all buffs from all enemies. The damage inflicted by this skill increases by 10% for each buff removed. Now, he's gonna buff strip you, and again, I said you need a block debuffs buff to stop the boss from landing these provokes. So my advised strategy is to use a protection set. You get protection gear from Hydra, and at the 9-piece protection, you have a 75% chance of placing a protected buff. So build your block debuffs champion in a protected set so that you don't get buff stripped and then get provoked or whatever else. You can also, that'll also give you a damage increase, right? The champions that we're going to be using for our block debuffs role, we're going to be using an Elva Autumnborn today, is in a, I believe it's like 6-piece protection. So we don't have quite enough to do the 9-piece, but that's because I've gotten really unlucky on my speed rolls on banners where you lose too much speed for Elva to put her in a 9-piece protection set. Then Unholy Metamorph here transforms the Chimera into either its Ram, Lion, or Viper form, also removes all buffs and debuffs from the Chimera. Transfixing Presence, the passives here, receives 10% less damage for each enemy with no buffs, up to 50%. Also receives 50% less damage from enemies under provoke debuffs. Again, just another reason to bring a block debuffs buff, right? And then Savage Evolution. For every 3 trials completed, the Chimera's ultimate form will receive the following bonus effects and stat boosts. So remember how I said you want to do trials? You do want to do trials, but it's also going to damage you. 1 to 3 trials will ignore unkillable buffs and gain 5% attack. 4 to 6 trials ignores block damage buffs and gains 5% crit damage. 7 to 9 trials ignores 25% of defense and gains another 5% crit rate. 10 to 12 trials ignore damage reduction for anything except buffs and debuffs, gives another 10% attack. 13 to 15 trials ignore ally protection, crit damage, extra 10% there. 16 to 18 trials ignore defense by 50% and then gains another 10% crit rate. 19 to 21 trials ignore strengthen buffs, gives another 15% attack. 22 to 24 trials ignore shield buffs, 15% crit damage. And then 25 to 27 trials ignore 100% of defense and gives another 15% crit rate. So you want to watch out for this. The more trials you do, the harder you will get slapped. Then Almighty Chimera, immune to petrification, stun, freeze, sleep, provoke, block active skills, block passive skills, fear, true fear, hunter's gaze, berserk, and enfeeble debuffs. Also immune to HP exchange effects, HP balancing effects, cooldown increasing effects, turn meter reduction effects, and destroy max HP effects. Pretty typical boss passive. Incoming damage inflicted by skills that scale on the Chimera's max HP cannot exceed certain amounts per difficulty, right? So we're going to be on brutal difficulty today, so that's 160,000. Now, that is just a baseline that max HP skills do. It is not the cap saying that they cannot do more than this, so you can actually scale that up with weaken and crit damage and all of that kind of stuff. And for that reason, enemy max HP champions are absolutely awesome. In addition, the damage taken from 1 tick of a 2.5% poison debuff cannot exceed 10,000 HP. The damage taken from 1 tick of a 5% poison debuff cannot exceed 20,000 HP. Poison is not the best way to damage the boss, but there is a trial for it in the Viper form, and it's okay. The damage taken from 1 tick of a HP burn debuff cannot exceed 40 HP. Reflected damage and damage taken from the War Master or Giant Slayer Masters cannot exceed 100,000 HP. Damage taken from smite debuffs cannot exceed certain amounts based on the difficulty. That is, I believe every boss has the Almighty Chimera, or sorry, okay, so it's just the Almighty Ram, and then the Lion has the Almighty Lion, and it's exactly the same passive. It is exactly the same passive on each form. All right, so now that is the ultimate form. He's going to try to slap you, and he's going to try to provoke you. So bring a block debuffs buff. The Ram form. The Ram form is the most annoying Chimera form. The A1 attacks 2 times at random. The first hit will prioritize an enemy under the duel effect. Each hit decreases a target's turn meter by 50%. If the target's turn meter is less than 50%, also places a stun debuff for 1 turn. Grants an extra turn if a stun debuff was placed by this skill. Again, bring a block debuffs buff. All right, the A2, a Hammer Tail Quake, attacks 1 enemy, then attacks all other enemies, increases the damage dealt to all other enemies by 1% for each 1% HP lost by the initial target, stacks up to 50%, places a stun debuff on all enemies except the initial target for 1 turn, also decreases the turn meters of all enemies except the initial target by 50% if the stun debuff was resisted or blocked. Then removes any block buffs from all enemies. This is why you want a protection set. Finally, places a 30% decreased crit rate debuff, a 25% decreased crit damage debuff, and a 30% decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Now, even with the protection set, you still have a chance that the block debuffs buff will not be protected and will get stripped, so you want to bring a couple cleansers as well, just in case, preferably cleansers that cleanse on a 3-turn cooldown. There is a lot going on with this boss, and I actually think there's more going on with this boss than Hydra. However, it's simple. It's more simple than Hydra because basically as long as you have a block debuffs buff, you're fine, because this boss will try to debuff you and decrease your turn meter. Decreasing your turn meter, you got to build resistance for. But as far as the debuffs go, just cleanse and block debuffs. And really every single form except the Viper form can be countered just by those 2 things. All right, so then the A3 attacks 1 enemy before attacking, removes any buffs positively affecting stats, and replaces them with their mirrored debuff equivalent, such as increased attack being replaced with decreased attack. Buffs such as continuous heal and strengthen will be replaced with heal reduction and weaken debuffs respectively. All mirrored debuffs will last for 2 turns. Increases the damage inflicted by 10% for each buff converted into a debuff by this skill. If the damage dealt by this skill is equal to or greater than 20% of the target's max HP, repeats the attack. So this skill here is going to prioritize enemies under the duel effect, right? So what you have to do is build a dual target, and we'll get to how to do that in just a second, and we'll get to who our dual target is going to be in just a second. Now, the ally who is targeted by the skill is probably going to die. So what you want to do is build a champion who can die and it be okay for a couple turns until they get revived. So for that, we're going to be using Grand Oak Padraig, all right? And we'll get to why we're going to use Grand Oak Padraig in a second. Basically, we don't want this to attack Elva. Elva has the Elixir of Life relic, which is really good, but because she is so essential to the team, we do not want this to hit Elva. Elixir of Life is going to heal her by a certain amount whenever her HP drops below 50%. So it'll kind of help create a little bit of a cushion there. Then we've got some passives here. We are not going to worry about the Almighty Ram passive. Then we've got the Lock Horns passive here. When the Chimera is under a Fear or True Fear debuff, the damage reduction effect from Duel does not activate. Decreases the chance of a Fear or True Fear debuff activating on the Chimera by 25%. Increases the Chimera's turn meter by 50% whenever a skill of the Chimera's does not activate because of a Fear or True Fear debuff. Removes any Fear or True Fear debuffs from the Chimera after activation, including protected debuffs. Active effect at the beginning of the Chimera's turn places the dual effect on the Chimera and the enemy with the lowest crit damage. This effect cannot be resisted or blocked, so you want to build a dual target with the lowest crit damage on the team. Now, I did forget to mention each of the forms, I believe, perhaps except the lion form, is susceptible to one of the kinds of crowd control. So Almighty Ram is susceptible to fear. So if you want to use a fear champion to try to counter this form, make him lose his turn, you can. All right, then the Unbreakable Focus. This is the passive that makes this particular form so awful. Passive effect. When attack reflects 25% of the damage the Chimera receives back to the attacker unless they're under a duel effect. Ignores 50% of a target's defense when attacking an enemy under a Taunt, Veil, or Perfect Veil buff. Active effect. When receiving any debuffs, instantly transfers them from the Chimera to the producer. Will not transfer debuffs that cannot be removed. So he's going to be reflecting all your damage back at you. It absolutely sucks. It absolutely sucks. This is why Calamitous is so good for the Chimera, because his A1 heals himself for 30% of the damage inflicted, so he'll never kill himself on the Ram form. Any other damage dealer that doesn't heal himself, though, is going to kill themselves on the Ram form, and it's absolutely awful. You lose a lot of damage when you fight the Ram form. But if you bring some shields, right, and if you bring some block debuffs and cleansing and a revive is super important, you'll be fine. You'll get through the Ram form okay, and be ready to counter the ultimate form again. Now, the ultimate form is just like the break. It's the easiest form to deal with, except lion form. I literally don't know what the lion form does because I never worry about it. All right, let's take a look. A1, Annihilation Claw. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each has a 50% chance of placing a True Fear debuff for 1 turn. Now I'm just realizing how many debuffs my team never gets because I just have block debuffs up constantly. All right, following the initial attack, has an 80% chance of repeating this attack against a new target. Will repeat the attempt against all remaining targets. The chance to repeat the attack lowers by 20% against each subsequent target. The damage inflicted by each successful repeated attack is decreased by 10%. Then the Shred Reality, the A2, attacks one enemy 3 times. The first hit places a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. The second hit places a 25% weakened debuff for 2 turns. Debuffs placed by this skill will ignore any block buffs. There you go. The third hit applies a debuff spread effect, taking any decreased defense and weakened debuffs on the target and placing them on all enemies except the initial target. Then attacks all enemies except the initial target if they are under decreased defense or weakened debuffs. Also increases the Chimera's turn meter by 5% for each debuff placed and spread by this skill. There you go. So he does ignore block debuffs, which is why you need a cleanse. As long as you have a cleanse, you'll be fine. And you know, this is so far all single target damage, so just bring some healing and you're good. All right. Atomizing Roar attacks one enemy. No AoEs on this form. Before attacking, removes any decreased attack, decreased crit rate, and decreased crit damage debuffs on the Chimera. Will ignore 50% of each target's defense. Will ignore an additional 10% of the target's defense for each debuff removed by this skill. We're not using any of those debuffs, so we're going to be good. Grants an extra turn if this attack kills an enemy. If the initial target survives, attacks all other enemies, deals damage equal to 50% of the damage inflicted by the initial attack. This attack cannot be critical. Okay, so he has his own damage reduction. I literally do not worry about the lion form. I think the ram form is scarier. I think the viper form is the scariest form. The lion form he has conditional AoEs, and he's not that hard to deal with. All right, then he has the unholy metamorph. Then he has the Predator's Feast. At the beginning of the Chimera's turn, places a Hunter's Gaze debuff on the enemy with the highest defense for 3 turns. This effect cannot be resisted or blocked. Whenever a Hunter's Gaze debuff is removed from an enemy, instantly activates the Annihilation Claw skill against that enemy, which is just the A1 with the True Fear and the chance to repeat against a different target. Then let's see, Petrification, Stun, Freeze, Sleep, Provoke, Block Active Seals, Block Passive Seals, Fear, True Fear, Hunter's Gaze, Berserk, and Enfeeble debuffs. So the lion is not susceptible to any crowd control. And then finally we have the Viper form. The Viper form, we're going to go A3, A2, A1 here. Haze of Pestilence, the A3, attacks all enemies before attacking, steals all buffs from all enemies except continuous heal buffs. Places 5% poison debuffs and a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 3 turns, then increases the duration of all poison debuffs on all enemies by 1 turn and instantly activates any poison debuffs on all enemies. So he is going to buff strip you. He's going to steal your buffs, not just buff strip. He's going to steal your buffs. Then he is going to place poisons on you, increase the duration of those poisons, place a poison sensitivity, and detonate all the poisons. This is a huge damage skill. Again, a protection set is your best friend here. All right, but you're again, not everybody is going to have that protected block debuffs, so you're going to want to bring a buff strip and a cleanse. Then the Stinger Cyclone attacks all enemies. This attack deals single target damage to each target individually rather than AoE damage. Before attacking, places a Hex debuff and a 100% heal reduction debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, instantly activates all poison debuffs on all enemies 2 times, then transfers all debuffs from the Chimera to all enemies under Hex or heal reduction debuffs placed by this skill, increases the Chimera's turn meter by 5% for each debuff transferred. Again, a block debuffs. But if you don't have that, you're gonna need to be really, really tanky and have some sort of resistance to poison. I would bring shield. I would bring a shield debuff, a shield buff to counter this skill. Then on the A1, Putrid Fang attacks all enemies. If there are any dead enemies or if the initial attack kills at least one enemy, places an extra hit. That is something to worry about. Has a 50% chance of placing a Fear, True Fear, Freeze, Provoke, Sleep, Stun, or Petrification debuff on each enemy for 1 turn. Again, your block debuffs is going to be very important because this is another crowd control A1. You do not want your entire team to get crowd controlled every time the Viper form A1s. He's got the Unholy Metamorph. Then he's got this Deathly Contagion. Whenever an enemy is killed, places 1 Necrosis stack on all other enemies. Necrosis stacks cannot be resisted or blocked. Necrosis stacks can only be removed by reviving dead allies. If multiple champions are revived, the number of Necrosis stacks removed is equal to the number of champions revived. For this reason, you want to bring an AoE revive if at all possible. Senna Amberheart is like the AoE reviver right now for Chimera. Now, Necrosis stacks are like HP burns, except they don't go away. Every time a champion under Necrosis gets a turn, everybody on the team takes a tick of damage, and yeah, they just don't go away, and they are very annoying, especially if they are carried over into other forms. The passive effect, Enemy of Mortality. Revived enemies will have 25% less HP and 25% less turn meter. If an enemy would be revived with 50% HP, they will be revived with 25% HP instead. If an enemy would be revived with 25% or less HP, they will be revived with 1 HP instead. Whenever the Chimera kills an enemy, removes any block active skills debuffs from itself. At the start of the Chimera's turn, transfers all poison debuffs on the Chimera to all enemies. All transferred debuffs last for 2 turns. Again, bring a block debuffs. Also bring a block active skills debuff because you can actually block the Haze of Pestilence and the Stinger Cyclone because the Viper is susceptible to block active skills. Let's see. Then the active effect denies 1 enemy revival attempt. If multiple enemies are revived at once, will deny 1 random revival attempt. So the first time you revive, it's going to be denied, which means that that necrosis stack is going to stay up for another, 3 turns at minimum, right? Unless you somehow have a 2-turn revive. All right, Viper form is the hardest form and the form that we need to worry about. In addition to this, we have to do all the trials. Well, you don't have to do all the trials. Again, I would 1-key the difficulty first. In this case, that means getting over 36 million damage on Brutal, and then I would focus on worrying about the trials. So what is our team here? Our team is going to be Elva Autumnborn, Ninja, Mad Hatter, Grand Oak Podrick, and Corvus the Corrupted. This is just a damage team. This is not a trial team outside of Corvus. Corvus is going to be bringing the poisons and the poison sensitivities. Ninja is going to be our big damage dealer. Podrick's there as a cleanser, increased speed champion, turn meter booster, and he has an ally attack to help with some of those trials. Elva's there for our block debuffs, our increased speed, and our reviver. Mad Hatter's there to get some more damage out of Ninja. He's also got a increased buff duration, which is going to be really good for keeping up block debuffs, especially protected block debuffs. Corvus also has an increased buff duration, which is going to be, again, great for keeping up that protected block debuffs, as well as poisons and decrease attack. So that's going to be kind of the team. It's kind of a damage blitzing team. It's not worried about trials. If you do want to worry about trials, the champion I recommend using the most is Lydia. So you get Lydia for free from doing Faction Wars. She has poison sensitivity, she has block buff, she has block active skill, she has decreased defense, she has weaken, she has strengthen, increased speed, but then she has fears as well. Like she has everything that you really need to do the trials. She is a trial beast. Let me show you a couple turns on the Chimera Clan Boss. Here we go. We've got I really want to try Brutal, but I don't, I really want to try Nightmare, but I don't think we can. I'm going to show you Brutal right now. All right, there we go. We've got Hatter. Hatter being the fastest champion on the team. He's bringing us our weaken. Ninja's going to be bringing us our drop defense. He's going to be our main DPS at this point. We've got an ally attack there from Podrick, which is going to be absolutely awesome. There we go. We've got that decrease attack, which is great. We are missing a block buffs, which I usually have on the team because of Calamitous. However, I think we'll be able to do just fine. We're also missing a buff strip. Again, this is a damage blitzing team. We're going to go, I think we'll probably go 5 Chimera turns. There we go. There's Hatter's ability, which is going to be super solid with Corvus because Corvus just pumps out a bunch of debuffs, right? We're already at 1.4 million damage. As long as we stay with the turn count, you should be able to 1-key, not any difficulty. You won't be able to 1-key any difficulty, but you'll be able to 1-key a good chunk of them up to Brutal, I think. When you get to Nightmare, I think is when you have to start doing more damage than the turn count. But that is very hard if you're not at the right speeds, which is why Senna is such a beast. She fills turn meter whenever continuous heals are activated, which is really cool. So there we go. We're at 2 million at turn count 3. There we go. We've got another 200k damage from Ninja. Ninja's going to be ramping. Hatter's going to be making everything hit harder from Ninja, which is going to be awesome, especially based on the number of debuffs. So he and Corvus really synergize well together. Again, I made this team just to blitz damage. We're just worried about getting chests for Embries. I'm not super worried about trials at the moment. We are at 4 Chimera turns, 1 more. There is the 5th turn. We're at 3.5 million damage. I do want to see just how much damage everybody did. See what's happening here. So we got Ninja doing 2.7 million. Like, that is a insane number here. Elva doing most of the healing, and then Hatter after that. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I've been Felra, sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends. Make sure you drop your Chimera questions in the comments below. Have a great day, and I'll see you in another video.